Lord, when medicine says it's impossible, remind us that nothing is beyond your power. When hearts are broken, mend them. When hope feels lost, restore it in ways no one can deny. Welcome back to Mr. Comfort Stories, your home of comfort, where life's most powerful lessons come wrapped in unforgettable tales. Tonight's story begins at its highest point of emotion. A man who once sat in a doctor's office crushed by the words, "You are sterile," now cradles 3 tiny lives in his arms. His tailored suit is soaked with tears, his hands trembling as he whispers in disbelief, "But the doctors said I could never." The nursery around him hums softly with monitors and the gentle rustle of blankets. Nurses look on, moved to silence, while the woman beside him, Simone, the one who risked her own life to save his, rests on the bed, her strength spent, but her face glowing with peace. For Preston Hale, billionaire, businessman, man of steel to the world, this moment breaks him in the most beautiful way. Not because of loss, but because of grace. But how did he get here? How did a man convinced his bloodline would end with him end up holding not 1, but 3 newborns, all born of the woman who had dragged him out of fire? Stay close, because the journey is breathtaking, the twist unforgettable, and the moral one you won't soon forget. Before we continue, I kindly ask you, please like this video and drop a comment. It helps YouTube share this story with more people who need hope tonight. Long before those cries of new life filled the air, there was a night when death seemed certain. The rain came down hard against the highway, sheets of water smearing across Preston Hale's windshield. His luxury car tore through the storm like a wounded beast, its engine screaming as if to echo the rage in his chest. Minutes earlier, the doctor's verdict had shattered him sterile. For a man who had conquered boardrooms and built towers of steel and glass, this single word cut deeper than any business defeat. Why me? He roared into the storm, fists clenching the wheel. The question was swallowed by thunder. He pressed harder on the accelerator, blind to the slick sheen of water waiting ahead. The tires lost grip, the car skidded, metal shrieked, and in a violent blur it spun out of control. In seconds the world turned upside down, an explosion of sparks, glass, and twisting steel. The Lamborghini slammed into the guardrail, flames licking at the hood as smoke poured into the night. Unconscious, Preston slumped against the seat, a thin line of blood snaking down his temple. Alone on that dark stretch of road, his empire, his wealth, his pride, none of it could save him, but someone else would. Up ahead, a modest sedan pulled over. Simone Brooks, heading home after a long shift at her family's restaurant, saw the wreckage. Without hesitation, she sprinted toward the flames. She wasn't thinking of danger, or of who sat trapped behind that glass. She thought only of saving a life. The heat was merciless. Flames curled across the hood, their glow reflecting off the wet asphalt. Smoke clawed at the night sky, and each second meant the difference between life and death. Simone's heart hammered as she tugged at the driver's side door. It was jammed tight. She glanced through the cracked window and saw him, his head tilted, eyes closed, chest rising faintly. Whoever he was, he had moments left. "Lord, give me strength," she breathed. Snatching up a loose rock from the roadside, she smashed the window. Glass splintered across her arms, slicing her skin. She ignored the sting. Reaching through, she unlatched the lock and heaved with all her might. Still stuck. The flames hissed closer, heat searing her forearm. She wedged herself low, braced her legs, and pulled again. This time, the door creaked open just enough. Simone reached in, hooked her arms under his shoulders, and dragged. He was heavy, dead weight, unconscious, but adrenaline surged through her. Step by step, she pulled him clear of the wreck just as the fire flared higher. They collapsed together onto the soaked grass. Preston's body was limp, blood trailing from his temple, but his pulse throbbed weakly beneath her fingertips. Relief broke through her fear. "Stay with me," she whispered, pressing her burned arm to the earth to steady herself. "Father, don't let him die tonight." Sirens wailed in the distance. Simone didn't wait for credit, applause, or thanks. When the flashing lights finally washed over the wreck, she slipped quietly back into the night, her burned arm throbbing, her heart still racing. "My friend, let's pause here for just a moment." That night could have ended in flames and silence. Instead, it opened the first page of a story that proves God still writes miracles in human lives. Welcome again to Mr. Comfort Stories, your home of comfort. This is where ordinary people cross paths with extraordinary grace, and where life's hardest blows often give way to its sweetest blessings. Now, let me ask you, have you ever faced a moment where all hope seemed gone, where the experts said there is no way forward? That's where Preston stood, wealthy, respected, yet crushed by sterility and nearly buried in fire. And yet, through the courage of one woman and the hand of God, his tomorrow looked nothing like his yesterday. But here's the question that brings us together tonight. How did this sterile billionaire, a man convinced his bloodline would die with him, end up holding triplets in his arms, tears soaking their blankets? And how did that woman, the stranger who dragged him out of a burning car, become the mother of his children? Stay with me, because the twists ahead will stir your heart, and the lessons may just change the way you see your own journey. Right now, before we go deeper, please like this video and drop a comment below. Your support doesn't just help this channel, it helps these stories reach others who need encouragement tonight. The air in Dr. Meyer's office carried that faint mix of antiseptic and paper, too clean, too clinical. Preston Hale sat on the leather chair, his tall frame folded in an uncharacteristic slump. He had faced hostile boardrooms, survived cutthroat negotiations, and walked away with his head high. But today, his throat was dry, palms clammy against the armrests. Dr. Myers adjusted his glasses, his expression heavy. "Preston, we ran the tests 3 separate times." His voice carried a gentleness that somehow made the blow sharper. "The results are conclusive. You're sterile." The words hung in the air like a gavel. Preston blinked, certain he'd misheard. No, that's not possible. There has to be a mistake." "I wish I could tell you otherwise," Dr. Meyer said quietly. "But medicine is clear. It isn't something money can reverse." Preston's jaw clenched. He had built towers that scraped the skyline. He had reshaped markets. But here sat a man telling him his body had set a limit he couldn't buy his way past. His grey-blue eyes burned, though his voice came out raw and broken. "Run them again. There must have been a mix-up. Preston," the doctor leaned forward, voice softening. "I know this is painful, but I wouldn't tell you if I wasn't sure." A silence pressed between them, so thick Preston felt suffocated. He rose abruptly, the leather chair groaning under the sudden shift. "You're wrong," he snapped, grabbing his coat. "You don't know me. You don't know what I'm capable of. Please, at least let me explain your options." But the door slammed before Dr. Myers could finish. Preston strode down the hallway, his polished shoes striking against the tile in hard, angry beats. Nurses glanced up as he passed, sensing the storm in his demeanor. He didn't care. His empire had always been built on control, but here was a truth he couldn't bend or bribe. The word sterile pounded in his head, each repetition like a hammer against steel. Outside, the evening sky sagged heavy with rain. Preston barely noticed as he stormed into the parking lot, tossing his keys into his palm. His Lamborghini sat there gleaming, a beast of machinery that usually fed his pride. Tonight it felt like his only ally, something powerful, something he could command, unlike his own failing body. He dropped into the driver's seat, slammed the door, and hit the ignition. The engine roared to life, filling the silence with raw fury. Without thinking, he gunned the accelerator, peeling out onto the slick highway. The rain blurred the windshield. Wipers swiped furiously, but nothing could clear the storm inside his chest. "Why me?" he shouted, voice swallowed by the growl of the engine. "I've given everything. I've earned everything. And this is what I get." His knuckles whitened against the steering wheel. He remembered the doctor's calm face, the pity in his voice. It fueled Preston's rage. He pressed harder, speed climbing, headlights streaking past in ghostly flashes. Memories stabbed at him, holding his late father's cufflinks and vowing to carry on the Hale name, dreaming of a son to teach, a daughter to cherish. All of it had just been torn from him in a single sentence. Sterile, the word echoed, cruel and final. The rain thickened, smearing the world into streaks of grey. Preston blinked hard, fighting the blur, but his chest felt tight, breath shallow. He pressed down again, faster, faster, as if outrunning the truth. Lightning split the sky. The road gleamed slick beneath the sudden flash, a deadly mirror. His tires hissed, struggled, then lost grip. It happened in a blink. The Lamborghini jerked sideways, tires screeching. Preston yanked the wheel, but momentum mocked him. The car spun violently, his body slammed against the seatbelt, glass rattling in its frame. "Control it! Control it!" He gasped, but the car had other plans. It swerved hard into the guardrail with a metallic scream, sparks exploding into the night. The world tilted, turned upside down, and in one sickening lurch came to a crashing halt. The hood crumpled, smoke seeping from beneath. Then came the fire. Small at first, licking at the edges of the engine, then greedier, brighter, hungrier. Preston's head lolled, blood trickling from a cut at his temple. Consciousness fluttered, the sharp scent of fuel filling his lungs. He tried to lift his arms, but they felt like lead. His chest rose in shallow, stuttering breaths. Through the fractured glass, rain and fire danced together, water hissing against growing flames. Sirens were nowhere in earshot. Alone, battered, he couldn't move. His empire, his fortune, none of it mattered here. The fire snapped louder, daring to climb. With every second, heat spread closer, pressing against the cabin. Preston groaned, eyelids heavy. For once in his life, he was powerless. The night seemed ready to swallow him whole. Headlights cut through the storm. A modest sedan slowed, pulling to the shoulder. Simone Brooks, exhausted after locking up her family's restaurant, froze at the sight ahead. Flames. A car mangled against steel. Her heart skipped. She could keep driving, let someone else deal with it. But her feet were already moving, instincts louder than fear. Rain plastered her hair against her face as she ran. The fire spat sparks as if to warn her back. She ignored it, yanking at the driver's door. Jammed. She pressed her face close to the glass, eyes widening at the unconscious man inside. Blood, smoke, time slipping away. "God, help me," she whispered. Her eyes darted until they landed on a rock near the shoulder. She grabbed it, swung hard. Glass shattered, cutting across her forearm. She shoved her arm through, fumbling for the lock. Click. The door gave just an inch. Simone wedged her body, pulling with all her weight. At last it creaked open. She reached inside, hooked her arms beneath his shoulders and pulled. He was tall, solid, heavy. But adrenaline surged, lending her strength. Step by step, she dragged him away just as the fire burst higher. They collapsed together onto the wet grass. His pulse was faint but present. Relief flooded her. "Stay with me," she begged, pressing her palm to his chest. "Don't you give up." Sirens wailed faintly in the distance. Simone stood cradling her burned arm and glanced once at the man she had just saved. Then, quietly, before the flashing lights reached her, she slipped back into the storm. When Preston opened his eyes again, the world was white and sterile. but this time in the safety of a hospital suite. His head throbbed, bandages tight around his temple. Machines hummed softly at his side. He blinked, adjusting, before noticing a familiar face. Markson, his longtime assistant, seated in a chair by the window. "You're awake," Markson said with relief. "You had an accident. It was bad. Fragments returned, rain spinning metal, fire." Preston frowned. "How? How did I get out?" Markson leaned forward. "A woman pulled you out before the car went up. The paramedic said you'd have been gone in minutes without her." Preston's breath caught. "Who?" "That's the thing," Markson admitted. "She left before anyone could get her name. But she had burns. We're trying to track her down." 2 days later, Markson returned with an envelope. "We found her address, sent her compensation, but—" He paused. She returned the check unopened. Preston's brows furrowed. "She refused it?" "Yes. Said she didn't want your money." For the first time since the accident, something stirred in Preston beyond despair, who risked everything for a stranger and then turned away from a billionaire's wealth. His voice carried steel now, not just curiosity. "Find her. I don't care what it takes. I need to know who she is." As machines beeped steadily around him, Preston Hale, who once thought legacy was dead, found himself gripped by a new obsession, the mysterious woman who had carried him out of fire. Rain tapped softly against the hospital windows as Preston sat in his suite, staring blankly at the TV screen, which played muted news he wasn't watching. The moment Markson returned, he straightened. "Well?" Preston asked, voice tight. Markson nodded. "Her name is Simone Brooks, lives on the south side, runs a place called Heaven's Table, old family-owned restaurant." Preston repeated the name slowly. "Simone Brooks." "She didn't just walk away," Markson added. "She returned the check without even opening it. Left a note saying, 'Life isn't something you can buy back.' I did what I had to do." Preston leaned back, eyes narrowing. That kind of integrity wasn't something he encountered often, not in business, and certainly not from people who knew who he was. "I want to see her," he said quietly. Markson looked hesitant. "She's not expecting that." "Neither was I," Preston replied. "But here we are." He got up, wincing as a stitch in his side reminded him just how close he had come to death. But nothing could stop him now. He needed to lay eyes on this woman who had walked away from flames and from fortune without asking for anything in return. There was something about that kind of strength, something rare. A week later, Preston stepped into a part of the city he'd only ever passed through in his chauffeured car. The streets here weren't polished or guarded by security gates, but they breathed life. Kids laughing outside barbershops, old folks on porches sipping sweet tea. When he opened the door to Heaven's Table, a brass bell jingled gently. The warmth of cornbread, smoked turkey, and something sweet in the oven hit him first. Gospel music played softly over the speakers. Preston stood awkwardly near the entrance, his tailored coat making him stick out like a flag at a family reunion. He scanned the small dining area, then spotted her. Simone stood behind the counter, apron dusted with flour, wiping her hands on a towel. She looked up and paused. Her eyes, deep and steady, narrowed just slightly. "You made it," she said. Preston blinked. "You remember me? I don't forget the people I drag out of burning cars," she replied calmly. He let out a soft, surprised laugh. "Fair." Simone walked toward him, arms folded loosely. "How'd you find me?" "Persistence," he replied. "And a man named Markson." They stood in silence for a beat. Then Simone motioned toward a booth. "If you came here to thank me again, you already did enough just waking up." He slid into the seat. "That's not why I'm here." Something unreadable flickered in her eyes. Not fear, not suspicion, just patience. She waited to hear more. Preston reached into the inside pocket of his coat and pulled out the envelope. Neat handwriting marked it, returned to sender. He laid it on the table between them. You turned down a thank you most people would have taken without question. Simone sat across from him now, legs crossed, posture relaxed. That check was heavy. Preston raised an eyebrow. Heavy. It carried a weight I didn't want to accept, she said. See, when you save someone's life, it's sacred. Money shouldn't follow behind it like a receipt. The words hit him harder than he expected. He was used to gratitude that came with the price tag, favors traded, deals struck. But this woman, she saved his life and walked away without asking for anything. I wasn't trying to buy you, he said carefully. I know, but I also know how easily gifts turn into expectations. He looked down at the envelope, then back at her. So why did you do it? Simone shrugged gently. Because you were alive and in danger. That's enough reason for me. Preston leaned back. You're not like anyone I've ever met. I get that a lot. She smiled slightly. Something shifted in that booth. Not romantic, not yet, but real. For the first time in a long time, Preston felt like he wasn't being seen as a CEO. He was just a man, alive because someone else had chosen compassion over comfort. Preston kept coming back. At first he told himself it was to express gratitude properly. Then it was to try the peach cobbler, which Simone had modestly said was her late mother's recipe. But by the fifth visit, he'd stopped pretending. There was something about the way Simone ran her space, calling customers by name, laughing from the gut, praying under her breath before plating meals. It wasn't performative. It was peace. One Thursday afternoon, he arrived earlier than usual. The restaurant was quieter, with only a few people seated. Simone raised an eyebrow. Didn't peg you for the lunch crowd. He smiled. Didn't peg myself for the sweet tea kind either. But here I am. She handed him a glass. Let me guess. Still chasing that cobbler? I might be chasing something, but I doubt it's just dessert. Simone paused. Is that your idea of charm? I'm a little out of practice, he admitted. She laughed then, full and honest. Keep practicing. You'll get there. Something passed between them. Not loud or sudden, just a small opening like a door cracked just enough to let light through. Preston found himself lingering after meals, helping clear plates when the place emptied out. Simone didn't stop him. In the quiet of heaven's table, something tender began to grow, not rushed, not declared, but felt. Words spread quickly in the neighborhood. The man in the suit is back again. Preston had become a regular fixture. He showed up rain or shine, usually in pressed slacks, but sometimes, to everyone's shock, in jeans and a hoodie. He didn't just sit anymore. He rolled up his sleeves, wiped down tables, even took orders on slow afternoons. Simone watched all of it with cautious interest. She didn't praise him, didn't fawn, but she noticed. You don't seem to mind getting your hands dirty, she said one day as they scrubbed trays together. I spent most of my life behind glass, he replied. Felt safe, but not real. This place? It's real. She handed him a towel. So what are you hoping to find here? He looked at her and didn't blink. Peace, maybe purpose. Their conversations became longer. Not about wealth or property, but about childhood memories, favorite meals, dreams unspoken. One evening, he brought her flowers. Simple, not flashy. Simone looked at them, then back at him. No diamonds today? She teased. Not unless you find these tulips sparkling, he replied. She laughed softly, placing them in a jar by the window. The restaurant wasn't just feeding the community now, it was becoming the backdrop of a quiet healing, one tray, one talk, one glance at a time. One night, long after closing, Simone poured 2 mugs of decaf and joined Preston at a booth near the kitchen. He looked worn, not in appearance but in spirit. There's something I haven't said, he began. She waited, her gaze steady. "I can't have children." Silence. Preston's jaw tightened. The accident wasn't the worst part. The news that came before it. "I was told I'm sterile, completely, no chance." He expected pity, or maybe polite discomfort. Instead, Simone reached across the table and placed her hand over his. "Preston, don't let science have the final word," she said quietly. "Doctors are smart, but God is sovereign." He blinked, caught off guard. "You really believe that?" With everything in me, the cafe light cast soft shadows across the table. Preston stared at their hands, hers warm, firm, unmoved. Something loosened in him, not hope, not yet, but maybe relief. "I've wanted a family for as long as I can remember," he said, "and now—" "You're still breathing," Simone said, "which means anything can still happen." Preston looked up. "How do you stay so grounded?" Simone took a breath. "You want the honest answer?" He nodded. "I made a promise to God when I was 17, that I'd wait until marriage. I've kept that promise." Preston blinked. "Wait, you're a virgin?" "Yes." He stared at her, not in disbelief but awe. "Why?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. "Because I've seen too many people give their bodies to people who never loved their soul. I didn't want that. I wanted my first to mean forever." He swallowed hard. "You're something else, Simone." She tilted her head. "That scares you?" He shook his head. "No, it humbles me." From that night on, the air between them changed. It wasn't tension, it was reverence. Preston treated her differently, not as a conquest, but as something sacred. He started walking her to her car after every shift, praying silently as he did. Simone, in turn, saw his effort. She saw how he listened, how he held back, how he showed up even when he had nothing to prove. They didn't call it love. Not yet. But in every act of respect, in the silences they shared, in the small ways they honored each other, a foundation began to form. And it was strong. Saturday morning sunlight cut across the church parking lot, where folding tables groaned under the weight of canned goods and boxes of fresh produce. Simone tied her apron a little tighter, hair pulled back, and smiled as a line of neighbors formed. Preston stood awkwardly at her side, sleeves of his button-down rolled to the elbow. For a man used to boardrooms and mahogany tables, this was foreign ground. "Here," Simone said, handing him a box of apples. "Just pass them out. Simple as that." He nodded, stepping to the line. An older woman shuffled forward, her hands trembling slightly. Preston bent down, softened his voice. "Take these, ma'am. They're sweet." The woman's eyes lit with gratitude. Preston felt something shift, a quiet satisfaction that had nothing to do with profit margins. As the morning wore on, sweat dampened his shirt. His muscles ached, but his spirit felt lighter. During a break, Simone handed him a bottle of water. "Didn't think you'd last," he chuckled. "Didn't think I would either. But this," he gestured at the crowd, the laughter, the chatter, "feels real." Simone tilted her head. "That's the point. Serving others keeps us grounded." For the first time in years, Preston felt grounded. Not as a CEO, not as a sterile man haunted by what he couldn't have, but as a person simply handing apples to another. Later that evening, Simone invited Preston to her aunt's backyard cookout. The air buzzed with gospel music from a small speaker, smoke from the grill curling heavenward. Kids darted between tables, chasing each other with plastic cups of lemonade. Preston found himself holding a paper plate piled high with ribs, collard greens and cornbread. He sat among Simone's cousins, listening as stories flowed like water. Simone's aunt slapped his shoulder. "Boy, you better eat that cornbread before it gets cold. That's Mama Brooks's recipe, handed down 3 generations." Preston laughed, obeying. He watched Simone laughing with her cousins, the glow of family radiating around her. Leaning toward him, Simone explained softly, "Every summer, We do this. It's how we keep family alive. Food, music, stories, it all matters. He nodded, struck by the richness of traditions that money couldn't buy. In his own childhood, dinners had been quiet, formal, more about appearances than connection. When Simone caught his gaze across the yard, she smiled, lifting her glass of sweet tea and a mock toast. He raised his in return, feeling oddly at home in a world that was not his own. For the first time, Preston wondered if family wasn't about passing on a name, but about creating moments like this. Rooted, warm, unforgettable. Weeks later, Preston invited Simone into his world. A black car pulled up to his Manhattan estate, glass walls towering over manicured lawns. Inside, chandeliers spilled golden light onto marble floors. Staff moved briskly, greeting him with polished respect. Simone walked beside him quietly, her eyes taking in the luxury without awe. Dinner was served in a hall that could seat 30, though it was just the two of them. "You live in a palace," she said gently. "Some would call it that," Preston replied, swirling his wine. Yet Simone noticed the silence pressing at the corners. No children's laughter echoing down hallways, no photos cluttering the walls, no worn furniture carrying family history. "This place is beautiful," she said carefully, "but it feels empty." Preston glanced around, her words striking deeper than she knew. "Everything here," he admitted, "was built to prove I mattered, but most nights I sit alone." Simone reached across the polished table, her touch warm against cold marble. "Then maybe beauty isn't about what fills a room. Maybe it's about who shares it with you." Her voice lingered long after the plates were cleared, echoing louder than any applause he'd ever received at a shareholder meeting. Sunday morning, Simone nudged him into a pew at her church. The wooden benches creaked. Choirs sang with power that shook the rafters. Preston shifted nervously, unused to this kind of vulnerability. When the pastor invited the congregation to pray, Preston hesitated. He'd negotiated billion-dollar deals, yet folding his hands now felt harder. Simone whispered, "It's not about knowing the right words. Just be honest." So he closed his eyes. For the first time in years, Preston whispered into the quiet of his soul, "God, I don't know if you hear me, but if you do, help me." The words surprised him, raw, unpolished, but freeing. Tears stung his eyes. He felt Simone's hand slide into his, steady and sure. He opened his eyes to find her smiling softly at him. In that moment, Preston realized that maybe faith wasn't about certainty. Maybe it was about surrender. One evening, as they cleaned tables at Heaven's table, the question rose like smoke between them. "Preston," Simone asked gently, "have you thought about us? If this grows?" He paused, rag in hand. "Every day, and if it means no children?" Her voice was soft but firm. He looked away, throat tight. "That's the part that terrifies me. I want to give you everything, but I can't give you that." Simone reached out, touching his arm. "Preston, family isn't only about blood. It's about love, commitment, and what we choose to build." He shook his head, conflicted. "But what if you regret it? What if you look at me one day and see only what's missing?" She held his gaze. "Love isn't blind to flaws, it chooses anyway. If this is real, it can exist without conditions." Her words sank deep, but the doubt still lingered. Could love survive where legacy seemed cut short? It was late, the restaurant empty, lights dimmed. Simone stacked chairs, while Preston lingered near the counter. He cleared his throat, voice unsteady. "Simone, I need to say something before it eats me alive." She looked up, curious. "I'm falling in love with you." The words tumbled out, raw and unpolished. Her breath caught, eyes wide. He rushed on. "I didn't plan this. I didn't think I could even feel this way again, but every time I see you, I feel whole." Like I've been starving for something I didn't even know existed until you walked into my life. The silence stretched. Simone set down the chair slowly, her face unreadable. "Preston," she said softly, "you don't know what you're asking of me." He stepped closer. "I'm not asking. I'm telling you what's already true." Simone's chest rose and fell as she processed his confession. Her fingers toyed nervously with the towel in her hands. "I've guarded myself for years," she whispered. "I've kept walls high, because giving my heart away recklessly was never an option." Preston's voice broke. "I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here to honor you." Her eyes searched his, looking for cracks of insincerity. She found none. Finally, she exhaled. "Preston, I feel it too, but I'm scared." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Then let's be scared together. Let's figure it out one day at a time." A small tear slid down her cheek. She brushed it away, smiling through it. "You're persistent, I'll give you that," he chuckled softly. "When it comes to you, I'll never quit." That night, as they stood side by side in the quiet restaurant, something undeniable settled between them. Not fireworks, not drama. Something steadier, the fragile, beautiful beginning of love. The autumn air in New York carried a crispness that made the city lights glitter sharper against the evening sky. Preston Hale stood at the edge of the Hudson River, watching ferries move lazily across the water. Behind him, a small team of staff adjusted candles along the railing, their soft glow reflecting in the ripples below. This wasn't one of his grand corporate events. There were no champagne fountains, no spotlights, no flashing cameras. For once, Preston didn't want extravagance. He wanted intimacy. He paced slowly, smoothing down his tie. What if she says no? The thought gnawed at him. Simone had never once been impressed by his wealth. She didn't need the diamonds or the estates. She needed truth. So that's what he planned to give her. On a table nearby, a velvet box sat waiting. Inside rested a ring he had chosen carefully, not the largest diamond in his collection, but a single, brilliant stone set in a band engraved with the words, "Forever is worth the wait." Preston exhaled, imagining her face. He wasn't sure if the ring would impress her, but he prayed the sincerity behind it would. As he rehearsed, Markson approached quietly. "Everything's ready, sir." Preston gave a nod. His stomach knotted. "She'll be here soon." When the car pulled up, his heart thudded. Simone stepped out in a simple dress, hair swept back by the wind off the water. She looked around, curiosity flickering in her eyes. "Preston," she said, walking toward him, "what is all this?" He extended his hand, trying to steady his breath. "Something I've been waiting a long time to say." The candles flickered. The city hummed in the distance. Preston knew the moment had come to risk everything, not in business, but in love. Simone's eyes widened as Preston guided her toward the railing, the lights of Manhattan stretching like stars behind them. She sensed the weight in his silence, the way his hand trembled slightly in hers. "Simone," he began, voice low but steady, "the night you pulled me from that wreck, I didn't just survive fire, I survived despair. You gave me back something I thought I'd lost, a reason to live." Her breath hitched. He continued, pulling the small velvet box from his pocket. "I can't promise perfection. I can't promise a life free of struggle. But I can promise to honor you, cherish you, and fight every day to deserve the love you've given me." Preston dropped to one knee. The candles shimmered, the river whispering behind him. "Simone Brooks," he whispered, voice breaking, "will you marry me?" Simone covered her mouth, tears spilling over before she could stop them. She had imagined proposals before, in fleeting daydreams, but never like this. Never with a man who had laid his soul bare, stripped of pride. Her heart pounded. "Preston." He looked up, eyes pleading, vulnerable in a way she'd never seen. "Yes," she finally said, voice trembling. "Yes, Preston, I will." The relief that broke across his face nearly undid her. He stood, pulling her into his arms as laughter mingled with her sobs. "You said yes," he whispered against her hair. "I said yes," she replied, holding him tighter. As applause rose from the small gathering of staff watching discreetly, Simone didn't care. In that moment, it was just the two of them, a man once broken and a woman brave enough to believe in him. The Hudson carried their joy on its surface, waves lapping gently, as though even the water was celebrating. The day of the wedding dawned clear, a soft blue sky stretching over New York. Guests gathered in a church decorated with white lilies and golden drapes. It was a venue chosen not for its grandeur but for its meaning, a place where vows would echo beyond marble and chandeliers. From the start, it was clear this was not a typical high society wedding. Gospel choirs filled the air with harmonies that rattled pews and lifted hearts, their voices weaving through the aisles like sunlight. On the other side, Preston's friends and associates, accustomed to quiet string quartets, looked around in awe as the music wrapped them in joy. When Simone walked down the aisle, escorted by her uncle, her dress was elegant but modest, lace tracing across her shoulders. Preston's breath caught at the sight of her. She wasn't just beautiful, she was radiant, walking toward him like an answer to a prayer he'd once been afraid to make. The ceremony bridged two worlds. Scripture readings alternated with classical pieces played by a string ensemble. A deacon prayed blessings over them, while a gospel soloist sang "Great is thy faithfulness," moving even Preston's sternest business partner to tears. When they exchanged vows, Preston's voice cracked. "With this ring I give you all of me, not just my fortune, not just my name, but my heart, my brokenness, and my future." Simone's reply was steady, her eyes glistening. "And I give you mine, my trust, my joy, my waiting, and my forever." When the pastor declared them husband and wife, the room erupted in cheers, claps, and hallelujahs. Preston kissed his bride, feeling her tears mix with his own. The reception that followed was a feast of blended traditions, fried chicken and collard greens served alongside filet mignon and truffle risotto. Jazz mingled with gospel, laughter with speeches. Two cultures, two lives, now bound into one. Later that evening, the reception moved into full swing. Music blared. Kids danced in circles, and elders watched with approving smiles. Preston found himself at a table with Simone's cousins, laughing as they recounted childhood stories about her. One cousin teased, "Did you know she once tried to fry fish without cleaning it? Whole house smelled for days." Simone groaned, burying her face in her hands. Preston laughed so hard his stomach hurt. "I'll hold that one over her forever," he teased. But the true test came when Simone's aunt handed him a tray of plates. "Billionaire or not, you're family now. Help us serve." Preston didn't hesitate. He took the tray, weaving through tables, passing out plates of food. His friends from the corporate world stared, surprised to see him balancing cornbread and greens with a grin. Simone caught his eye from across the room. Her smile told him everything. She saw him, not as a CEO, but as a man willing to humble himself for her people. Later, he joined the gospel line dance, awkwardly stumbling through the steps. The crowd roared with laughter, cheering him on. Preston laughed at himself, letting go of the polished image he had once guarded fiercely. In that moment, surrounded by her family's joy, Preston realized wealth meant nothing compared to belonging. The honeymoon suite overlooked Maui's coastline, the ocean stretching endless under the moonlight. Preston and Simone stood by the balcony, the sound of waves a steady rhythm beneath their silence. Simone turned to him, nervous but resolute. "This is new for me. Preston brushed her cheek with his hand. Then we'll take it slow. Every step together. They moved inside, candlelight flickering against the walls. Preston kissed her gently, savoring the moment, not rushing. His hands trembled slightly, not from inexperience but from reverence. Simone's breath caught as he whispered, "You're safe with me." Her fingers curled into his shirt, pulling him closer. Their laughter mingled with sighs as barriers fell, not in haste but in tenderness. When at last they lay together, Simone whispered a prayer, thanking God for love, for patience, for the gift of waiting. Preston pressed his forehead to hers, overwhelmed by the reality that this woman, pure in heart, steady in faith, had chosen him. It wasn't just intimacy, it was covenant. Later, as they rested in each other's arms, Preston whispered, "I'll never forget this night." Simone smiled softly. "Neither will I. Forever starts here." The waves outside crashed louder, as if nature itself was blessing their union. The plane touched down just as the sun began to sink over Maui, streaking the sky with shades of gold and soft pink. Preston and Simone stepped off the jet into warm, fragrant air, heavy with salt and plumeria blossoms. For Simone, who had never left the mainland, it felt like stepping into another world. Preston had arranged a small oceanfront villa, tucked away from crowds, perched on a cliff where waves struck the rocks below like a drumbeat. No reporters, no gala guests, no board meetings, only them. Inside, the villa's decor was simple but elegant. White linens billowing in the breeze from open windows, a fruit basket waiting with pineapple and mango, a handwritten note welcoming them to their new life. Simone stood barefoot on the balcony, wind teasing her dress, staring at the endless ocean. It's beautiful around her waist. Spent their first day exploring quiet beaches, dipping their feet into clear water, and walking along palm-lined paths. Preston insisted on carrying her sandals when the sand grew hot. Simone teased him for overpacking, but secretly loved the way he tried to anticipate her needs. That night, they sat on the balcony eating grilled fish and fresh papaya, stars scattered above them, brighter than either had ever seen. "It feels like time slowed down," Simone said. Preston smiled. "That's the point." For the first time since their vows, both felt the weight of their journey lifting, replaced by a tender anticipation for what was to come. Later that evening, the villa grew quiet, except for the ocean's steady rhythm below. Candlelight flickered across the room, casting a warm glow that softened every edge. Simone sat at the edge of the bed, fingers twisting nervously in the fabric of her robe. She had waited years for this moment, prayed for it, imagined it, but reality felt bigger than anything she had pictured. Preston approached slowly, sensing her tension. "We don't have to rush," he said gently. She looked up at him, eyes wide but steady. "I know, but I want this, with you." His voice held reverence, not urgency. He kissed her forehead, then her hands, as if asking permission with each touch. Simone's breath deepened, shoulders relaxing. When she finally stood and reached for him, he gathered her close, his heart hammering as hard as hers. Their laughter came in soft bursts, easing the nerves, their movements unhurried. For Simone, it wasn't just physical. It was the culmination of promises kept, of patience honored. For Preston, it was a miracle that someone so steadfast had chosen to give her first time to him. As they lay side by side afterward, hands still intertwined, both felt something sacred settle over them. It wasn't simply a honeymoon ritual. It was covenant turned flesh, love turned into action. Simone shifted onto her side, resting her head on Preston's chest. The sound of his heartbeat filled her ear, steady and strong. She reached for his hand and squeezed. "Let's pray," she whispered. Preston blinked, surprised but moved. Right now? Yes, right now. She closed her eyes, and he followed, their foreheads almost touching. Her voice was soft but sure. Father, thank you for this night, for the journey that brought us here. Thank you for keeping us, for patience, for redemption. Bless our marriage, bless our bodies, bless our future. Make our home a place of peace and joy. Preston swallowed hard, his throat thick. When she finished, he added his own halting words. And thank you for her, for giving me someone who sees me, not my money. Teach me to be worthy of her trust. They lay there in silence for a long moment, the sound of the waves their only amen. Simone opened her eyes, smiling at him. Prayer isn't just for church, she said softly. I'm starting to see that, Preston murmured, kissing her hair. The act of praying together after intimacy sealed the moment in a way neither expected. It wasn't just closeness of body, but unity of spirit. Hours later, Preston stood on the balcony, the night air cool against his skin. Below, the ocean crashed in steady rhythm, echoing the thud of his heart. He tightened the robe around his waist, staring out at the horizon. For years he had measured himself by numbers: net worth, quarterly growth, properties acquired. Yet one word from a doctor had made him feel less than whole, sterile. Tonight, that label felt smaller. Simone stepped up beside him, wrapping her arms around his waist from behind. What are you thinking about? He turned, cupping her face. About how I spent so long feeling broken, and how tonight, I don't... Her eyes softened. You were never broken to me. He kissed her gently, gratitude flooding him. I didn't think I'd ever feel like a man again, he admitted, but you make me feel... enough. Simone pressed her forehead to his. You are enough. Always have been. In that moment, Preston realized redemption wasn't about reversing a diagnosis. It was about finding someone who saw his worth beyond it. He held her tighter, inhaling the scent of her hair, feeling the warmth of her body. For the first time in years, he felt whole. The next morning, sunlight spilled into the villa, turning the white linens gold. Preston woke first, watching Simone sleep, her face relaxed in the quiet. He thought of the life waiting back home, board meetings, deadlines, headlines. But here, in this small slice of time, he saw a different future taking shape. When Simone stirred awake, he brushed a thumb over her cheek. Good morning, Mrs. Hale. She smiled sleepily. Good morning, Mr. Hale. They spent the day exploring Maui's hidden trails, stopping at small roadside stands for coconut water and banana bread. Preston found himself laughing more than he had in years, letting her lead the way down narrow paths. Over lunch at a local cafe, Simone said, I don't want our marriage to be just about surviving the world. I want it to be about serving it too. Preston nodded. Then we'll build our life like that. Together, they sealed the vow with a quiet kiss, unnoticed by the other patrons. That evening, as they sat on the beach watching the sun sink below the horizon, Preston realized they were establishing more than routines. They were laying the foundation for a marriage rooted in faith, humility, and joy, not just wealth. Simone reached for his hand. This is just the beginning. He squeezed back. The best beginning. Waves rolled in, steady and sure, mirroring the rhythm of two lives now intertwined. Weeks after their honeymoon, Simone stood in the kitchen at Heaven's table, staring down at a pot of stew. The aroma of tomatoes and herbs usually made her smile. Today, her stomach churned. She set the spoon down quickly, pressing a hand against her mouth. Running to the sink, she steadied herself, taking slow breaths. Simone, you okay? Her cousin Mariah asked from the counter. I think so, Simone muttered, though her face told another story. The nausea wasn't new. For several mornings now, she had woken with queasiness, sometimes so strong she couldn't touch breakfast. She chalked it up to exhaustion, adjusting to married life, running the restaurant, and keeping up with church service. But deep down, a small suspicion grew louder each day. That night at home, Preston noticed her pale face as she pushed food around her plate. "You're not eating again?" Simone sighed. "I don't know what's wrong. I feel tired all the time, and the smells I usually love, they're overwhelming." His brow furrowed with concern. "Should we call the doctor?" "Not yet," she said quickly. "There's something I need to check first." Later, alone in their bathroom, Simone gripped the sink, staring at her reflection. Could it be? She had never been with a man until Preston. Doctors had said he was sterile, but her body whispered a different story. Her hands trembled as she whispered a quiet prayer. "Lord, if this is what I think it is, give me the courage to face it. And if not, give me peace." Simone stood in the pharmacy aisle, scanning the shelf nervously. Rows of pregnancy tests stared back at her, each promising accuracy, each daring her to believe the impossible. She grabbed one quickly, hiding it beneath her purse as she checked out. Back home, she locked the bathroom door, her pulse pounding. She read the instructions twice, hands clammy, before finally taking the test. Minutes stretched like hours as she set it on the counter, pacing the small room. Finally, she forced herself to look. 2 pink lines glowed back at her. Her knees nearly buckled. "Oh my God," she whispered, tears spilling. "I'm pregnant." She pressed a hand to her belly, trembling. The word felt unreal, yet truer than anything she had ever known. For a long moment, she simply sat on the bathroom floor, crying and laughing at once. This wasn't supposed to happen. The doctors had been sure. But here it was, life blooming inside her. That evening, she tried to act normal, but Preston noticed the way her eyes shone with secrets. "What happened today?" he asked softly as they lay in bed. Simone hesitated, her heart racing. She wanted to tell him, but she also wanted to be sure, wanted to find the right moment. For now, she only whispered, "Something wonderful." Preston kissed her forehead, puzzled but content to wait. Simone lay awake long after he drifted to sleep, one hand resting over her stomach, whispering prayers of gratitude and fear all at once. The next evening, Simone finally told him. "Preston," she began, sitting him down at the kitchen table. Her voice trembled. "I need you to listen before you react." He frowned, concerned. "You're scaring me." She took his hand, squeezing it. "I'm pregnant." The words dropped like a stone in still water. Preston blinked, sure he had misheard. "What did you say?" "I'm pregnant," she repeated, firmer this time. He pulled his hand back, running it through his hair. "That's impossible. The doctors said—" His voice cracked. "They said I was sterile." Simone reached for him again. "I know what they said, but the test is positive." He stood abruptly, pacing. "No, this doesn't make sense. It can't." He stopped, turning to her, eyes wide. "You're certain?" Simone nodded, tears in her eyes. "I'm certain." Preston sank back into the chair, burying his face in his hands. Shock, fear, and wonder battled across his features. How is this real?" "Because God writes stories no doctor can predict," Simone said gently. He looked at her, eyes shimmering. "I wanted this more than anything, but I convinced myself it would never happen." Her hand cupped his cheek steady. "And yet, here we are." Preston sat in silence, his hands trembling as he tried to absorb the truth. Every fact, every medical record screamed impossible. Yet Simone's calm presence pulled him back from disbelief. "Preston," she said softly, "you've lived your life by numbers and reports. But God doesn't need statistics to do his work. He writes the last word." He searched her face, desperate for assurance. "But what if it's a mistake? What if something goes wrong?" Her eyes held his steadily. "Then we'll walk through it together. But I believe this child, these children, are meant to be—" He let out a shaky laugh. Children. You're already talking plural. She smiled faintly. Faith doesn't measure in limits. Tears filled his eyes, the weight of years of longing crashing against this fragile hope. He leaned forward, clutching her hands as though anchoring himself to her belief. Simone, he whispered, if this is true, then my entire life changes tonight. It already has, she replied. If you believe love and faith can overcome the impossible, drop a heart below. 2 weeks later, they sat in Dr. Myers's office, tension buzzing in the air. Preston gripped Simone's hands so tightly her fingers tingled. The doctor scanned the ultrasound monitor, his brows shooting up. Well, this is remarkable. What is it? Preston demanded, leaning forward. Dr. Myers turned the screen toward them. Not one heartbeat, not two, 3, Simone gasped, covering her mouth. Preston's eyes widened, his world tilting. Triplets? The doctor nodded. Healthy, strong heartbeats. It's rare, but everything looks good so far. Preston staggered back in his chair, pressing a hand over his mouth. I can't believe this. Simone's tears flowed freely, a smile breaking through her shock. 3 blessings, she whispered. Preston turned to her, his voice choked. 3. After they said I'd have none. He pulled her close, burying his face in her shoulder, laughter and sobs mingling. The impossible had just multiplied. News of the triplets spread quickly through their families. Simone's relatives threw a small gathering at Heaven's table, filling the space with balloons and laughter. Preston stood awkwardly as cousins piled tiny onesies into his arms. You better learn fast, Simone's aunt teased. You're about to be outnumbered. At home, the couple transformed a spare room into a nursery. Preston, once consumed by contracts, now spent evenings assembling cribs, fumbling with instruction manuals, while Simone painted stars on the ceiling. You're terrible with a wrench, she teased, watching him struggle. He grinned. But I'm excellent at carrying heavy boxes. Simone laughed, resting a hand on her belly. The babies kicked, and Preston rushed to place his hand there too. His eyes lit up as he felt the tiny thumps. They're real, he whispered. They're really mine. Simone kissed him softly. Ours. For the first time in his life, Preston felt anticipation not for a business deal, but for midnight feedings and lullabies. The night before Simone's due date, Preston sat alone in the nursery. 3 cribs stood ready, small blankets folded neatly inside. Stuffed animals lined the shelves, a far cry from the boardroom trophies that once defined his worth. Thank you, he whispered, voice shaking. Thank you for proving me wrong. For giving me what I thought was lost forever. Simone appeared at the doorway, watching quietly before crossing the room. She knelt beside him, her belly brushing his shoulder. You okay? She asked softly. He looked up, eyes red but shining. I'm better than okay. I'm overwhelmed. I don't deserve this, Simone, but I'll spend the rest of my life trying to... She stroked his hair gently. That's all God asks. Gratitude and faith. Preston pulled her close, resting his head against her stomach, listening to the rhythm of 3 tiny lives within. For the first time in his life, Preston Hale wasn't the man with everything money could buy. He was simply a man undone by grace. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and adrenaline. Preston guided Simone through the sliding doors, her hand gripping his with surprising force. Sweat dotted her brow, though she managed a strained smile. I'm fine, she insisted through clenched teeth. Preston shook his head. You don't have to be fine, you just have to be here. Doctors hurried them toward the maternity wing, nurses wheeling Simone into a room prepped for delivery. Machines beeped steadily, a monitor tracing the rhythm of 3 tiny heartbeats. The reality of it all slammed into Preston. This was it. 9 months of hope and prayer condensed into one trembling moment. He kissed Simone's forehead. "I'll be right outside. I'm not leaving this floor." She clutched his hand tighter. "Don't faint," he forced a chuckle. "Not a chance. I've handled board meetings scarier than this." But his voice betrayed him. As the doors closed between them, Preston felt his chest tighten. This wasn't a merger or a stock decision. This was life, fragile and miraculous. Preston wore a path in the hallway carpet, his shoes squeaking with every turn. Nurses passed by with calm efficiency, offering polite smiles. He returned none. His nerves frayed with each muffled sound drifting from the delivery room. Markson, who had insisted on driving them to the hospital, sat on a bench nearby. "Boss, sit down. You're making the staff nervous." "I can't," Preston muttered. His hands shook. He tried to shove them in his pockets, but the tremor refused to hide. Time dragged mercilessly. Every minute felt like an hour, every silence like a verdict. Finally, a nurse emerged, her scrubs dotted with perspiration. "She's doing well," she said kindly, "but it's a long process." Preston nodded, relief and fear warring inside him. He pressed his palms together, whispering silently, "Lord, please, keep her safe. Keep them safe." The delivery room doors opened at last. A nurse stepped out, smiling. "Mr. Hale, come in." Preston stumbled forward, his heart pounding louder than the beeps of the monitors. Inside, the air was thick with relief and exhaustion. Simone lay back, drained but glowing, her eyes searching immediately for him. And then he saw them. 3 nurses stood in a row, each cradling a tiny bundle wrapped in pastel blankets. Pink, blue, yellow. "Mr. Hale," one nurse said softly, "meet your children." Preston's breath caught. He stepped closer, staring at the impossibly small faces. Their fists curled, their chests rising with fragile determination. "Oh my God," he whispered, voice cracking. "They're real." Simone's weak laugh reached him. "Of course they're real." Preston reached out, his hands trembling as a nurse gently transferred one of the babies into his arms. The weight was feather-light, yet it crushed him with emotion. He stared down at the tiny face, lips parted in a soft sigh. Tears blurred his vision until he could hardly see. "I was told this could never happen," he whispered, more to himself than anyone else. "But here you are, here you are." His knees buckled, and he sat in a chair quickly, clutching the baby against his chest. His tears soaked the small blanket as sobs shook his shoulders. Simone watched through her own tears, her smile weak but radiant. "You're a father, Preston." He nodded, unable to speak, holding on as if the world might snatch the moment away. Later, as the triplets rested in clear cribs beside them, Preston sat by Simone's bedside. His eyes remained fixed on her, as though words might fail if he looked away. "You saved me twice," he whispered. She frowned slightly. "Twice. The night of the crash," he said, his voice trembling. "You pulled me from fire. Tonight, you pulled me from despair. You gave me a family I thought I'd never have." Simone reached for his hand. "I didn't do this alone. God had the final say." Preston's eyes brimmed again. "I don't deserve you." She smiled faintly. "Good. Because I'm not here because you deserve me. I'm here because we belong to each other." The weeks that followed were a blur of diapers, feedings, and lullabies sung in the middle of the night. Preston traded late-night meetings for bottle warmers, his expensive suits often streaked with formula. Simone's family visited constantly, filling the home with casseroles, advice, and laughter. Preston learned to accept help, no longer embarrassed when an aunt corrected his swaddling technique. One evening, Simone walked into the nursery to find him asleep in the rocking chair. 2 babies nestled against his chest, the third resting on his lap. The sight brought tears to her eyes. This was their new normal, not polished, not perfect, but overflowing with love. As Preston stirred awake, he caught Simone's gaze. "We're outnumbered," he whispered with a tired smile. She kissed his forehead and blessed 3 times over. Heaven's table was louder these days, not just with customers, but with the squeals of 3 energetic infants learning to crawl. Preston sat cross-legged on the floor near the counter, his expensive suit traded for jeans and a plain shirt. Micah gurgled as he tugged at Preston's shoelace. Elijah pulled himself determinedly toward a toy spoon, and Naomi toppled onto her side, giggling at her own tumble. Customers chuckled from their booths, watching the billionaire, who once lived behind walls of marble and glass, now laugh with babies drooling on his shirt. "Careful, buddy," Preston said, scooping Elijah up before he bumped into a chair leg. He kissed the boy's head, the gesture natural, instinctive. Simone moved behind the counter, apron tied, serving food with practiced ease. Every so often, she paused to smile at the sight of her husband surrounded by their children, as comfortable here among clattering dishes and steaming pots as he had ever been in a boardroom. For Preston, this was wealth, not the billions still sitting in accounts, but the sticky hands reaching for him, the woman who met his gaze with unshakable love, the community who welcomed him as family. Word had spread. Heaven's table bustled daily with customers, not just for Simone's famous gumbo, but to catch a glimpse of the family whose story had become local legend. "That's him," one woman whispered to her friend, nodding toward Preston as he balanced Naomi on his knee. "The billionaire who couldn't have kids." "Look at him now," another customer murmured. "They say it was triplets, a miracle." Preston overheard sometimes, but he no longer bristled at the attention. Instead, he smiled, shaking hands, taking photos when asked. He wasn't the headline of some tabloid scandal anymore. He was a living testimony that money didn't buy joy, that statistics weren't the final word, that humility had changed him more than success ever could. Children climbed into his lap. Strangers told him their stories of hope and loss, and he listened, really listened. The once unreachable CEO now belonged to the people, not because he gave handouts, but because he shared his heart. One quiet evening, after closing time, Preston sat with Simone at a corner booth, the triplets asleep in strollers nearby. "I used to think legacy meant buildings with my name on them," he said slowly. "But when I'm gone, no one will care about skyscrapers." Simone reached for his hand. "So what will matter?" He looked toward the strollers, then back at her. "Them. Us. The lives we've touched here. Legacy isn't about being remembered by millions. It's about being remembered rightly by the ones who matter most." Simone's smile was soft, proud. "That's the lesson you were meant to learn." Preston nodded. "Faith taught me what reports couldn't. Humility showed me what pride blinded me to. And love. Love gave me everything." One night, Preston stood in the nursery again, cradling all 3 babies at once. The memory of that first overwhelming night rushed back, the weight of them in his arms, the tears he couldn't stop. "But the doctors said I could never," he whispered again, voice trembling. Now, though, his whisper wasn't disbelief. It was worship. He kissed each tiny forehead, his tears falling freely. Behind him, Simone leaned against the doorframe, smiling through her own tears. The journey from sterile billionaire to father of 3 had not been written in medical charts or financial forecasts. It had been written by grace, by courage, by love that refused to give up. And that story, once a private battle, had become a public testimony. Preston sat with Simone and the babies at Heaven's table one Sunday afternoon, sunlight pouring through the windows. Families around them chatted, children laughed, the air filled with warmth. Looking into the camera, Preston spoke softly to everyone watching. "If our story has touched you, if it's reminded you that faith and love can overcome the impossible, we ask you to share it. Like this video, leave a comment with your own miracle, And subscribe so you don't miss the stories that keep hope alive." Simone added gently, "Every click helps this story reach someone who needs to hear that no situation is too broken for God to heal." The triplets babbled in chorus, as if adding their own amen. And with that, the story closed, not with wealth flaunted or power displayed, but with a family whole, a future bright, and a message simple. True legacy is love. True wealth is faith. And the greatest miracles are often born where the world least expects them.